The moment Danielle Carter stepped through the glass doors of Ridgeway Martial Arts Academy, no one gave her a second look. Just another tired mom in worn sneakers and an oversized t-shirt waiting to pick up her daughter. But what no one knew, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that this quiet woman carried a storm inside her. A storm that had once shaken arenas and silenced champions. The gym pulsed with the scent of sweat and ambition. Danielle scanned the blue mats until she spotted her 16-year-old daughter Maya practicing kicks with a group of teens. Danielle gave her a warm smile, brushing a lock of gray, streaked hair behind her ear before settling into a bench near the wall. She planned to check a few emails while she waited. That was until he appeared Sensei Rick Dalton, the head instructor. Polished, loud, arrogant. He barked commands like a general and strutted across the dojo with the self-importance of a man who'd never been humbled. Danielle had seen his type before. Too skilled to be questioned. Too proud to imagine defeat. She didn't plan on staying long. But fate had other plans. What began as a simple pickup soon turned into a spectacle, one that would leave the whole gym breathless. Because when Rick called her out in front of everyone for a friendly demonstration, he didn't realize he had just challenged a sleeping legend. And this time the legend was ready to wake. Maya jogged over with her gym bag slung over one shoulder, cheeks flushed from practice. "Ready to go, Mom?" she asked, reaching for her water bottle. Danielle stood up, smiling. "Sure, baby. How was class?" "Good. Sensei Rick says I'm close to testing for my green belt next month." Danielle's heart swelled with pride. Ever since Maya started martial arts, she had blossomed more confident, more focused. Danielle would pay any price for that kind of growth. She was about to suggest they grab smoothies on the way home when Rick Dalton's booming voice sliced through the air. "All right, folks. Before we wrap up, who wants to see something a little entertaining?" The chatter in the room died instantly. All eyes turned toward the instructor. Danielle's instincts prickled. Something wasn't right. Rick scanned the gym theatrically before his gaze landed on her. A slow grin curled across his face. "You know what he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Let's give the parents a little show, especially the ones who think this is just glorified exercise." Maya tugged at her mother's arm. "Mom, let's just go, please." But Danielle didn't move. Rick was already walking toward her with exaggerated swagger, his black belt trailing like a banner of superiority. "You ever wondered what it feels like to be on the mat, Miss Carter?" "Danielle." "Carter," she replied evenly, her voice steady. "Perfect. Ever been curious about martial arts? You know, watching Bruce Lee movies thinking, hey, I could do that." A few nervous chuckles echoed around the room. Danielle looked around. Parents were avoiding her eyes. Some kids looked downright embarrassed for their instructor. She took a breath. "Not particularly. Maya's the fighter." Rick wasn't letting it go. He stepped closer, dropping his voice just enough to be smug but still audible to the crowd. "What do you say to a friendly match, just for fun? You might even learn something." Danielle didn't answer right away. She could feel Maya's grip tighten around her hand, her daughter's small fingers trembling slightly. She looked Rick square in the eyes. "One condition," she said quietly. He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what's that?" "When this is over, you apologize to every student here for the lesson you were about to teach." Rick burst into laughter. "Lady, when this is over, you'll be apologizing to the floor." His tone dripped with mockery. But Danielle didn't flinch. She calmly removed her jacket, revealing sculpted arms and a posture that made a few onlookers sit straighter. Whispers began rippling through the crowd. "Did you see the way she moves?" One teenager murmured, "She's not just some mom." Still, Rick remained oblivious. "Don't worry, folks," he called out, stretching dramatically. "This is just to prove why real training matters. You can't fake experience." If only he knew. As Danielle stepped onto the mat, something shifted. Her gait changed, no longer the soft shuffle of a suburban mom, but the grounded, purposeful steps of someone who had trained for war. The kids sensed it first. The parents soon followed. The air tightened. And Rick still thought he was in control. He had no idea that Danielle Carter had once been known by a different name. A name whispered with awe across arenas and gyms around the world. But by the time he found out, it would be far too late. Rick adjusted his belt, rolling his shoulders like a man preparing for a victory lap. He was performing playing to the crowd, high kicks, shadow punches, and exaggerated bow. "Hope you stretched, Mrs. Carter," he said with a smirk. "This might hurt a little." Danielle didn't respond. She simply stood still at the center of the mat, hands relaxed at her sides, feet planted in a stance that seemed casual until you looked closer. Her weight was perfectly balanced, her breath deep and rhythmic, her eyes calm but unblinking, locked onto Rick like a lion studying its prey. The gym fell into an eerie hush. Maya stood off to the side, clutching her water bottle to her chest, whispering, "Please, Mom, you don't have to do this." Danielle turned her head slightly, just enough to meet her daughter's eyes. "Sometimes, sweetheart, it's not about proving something," she said gently. "It's about teaching." Rick stepped forward and raised his voice to the watching students. "This is why we train seriously. You don't just walk in off the street and expect to hold your own against real fighters." The irony, of course, was lost on him. Danielle had spent 6 years in the cage under the name Danielle Knox, dominating every opponent from Las Vegas to Tokyo. She'd earned the nickname Silent Storm for her quiet demeanor and devastating precision. A 3-time world champion in mixed martial arts. Undefeated, unmatched, unforgettable. But all of it had vanished the day her little brother died, rushing to one of her matches. She left the sport that night, changed her name, buried her past, raised her daughter, started over. 13 years later, the storm was waking again. "Ready," Rick barked. Danielle gave a slight nod. With a sharp grunt, he lunged, throwing a textbook right cross-fast, well-timed, powerful. But it never touched her. She stepped off-center effortlessly, barely moving her feet, and let the punch slide past her cheek like a breeze. The momentum carried Rick forward, slightly off balance. He frowned and reset. "Lucky dodge," he muttered. He came again, jab, jab, hook, nothing connected. Danielle moved like mist. She weaved, tilted, shifted, just enough to avoid each strike without wasting an ounce of energy. Her arms stayed low, her expression unchanged, and yet the crowd was leaning in silent, captivated. Rick's bravado was cracking. He swung again, harder, faster. But Danielle wasn't there. She was everywhere and nowhere. Every missed punch made the mat echo louder, each failed attempt a spotlight on his growing frustration. One teen whispered to another, "She's not fighting him, she's studying him." Exactly. She was letting him tire himself out, inching closer with every miss. And Rick, too, blinded by his ego, couldn't see the trap he was stepping into. Then it happened. Rick overcommitted a wild haymaker and Danielle ducked under it like water slipping through a crack. In one graceful move, she tapped him lightly on the ribs as he passed. It was gentle, barely contact. But the message was clear. "I could have ended this already." Rick spun around, red-faced and panting. "What are you playing at Fight Back?" Danielle looked him dead in the eye. "I am fighting," she said quietly. "I'm just choosing how." And in that moment, everyone in that gym, including Rick, realized something chilling. This wasn't a spar. This wasn't even a contest. It was a lesson, and the teacher had only just begun. Rick's movements were starting to fray. Sweat trickled down his brow, soaking into the collar of his pristine GI. His breathing turned shallow, unsteady, more from confusion than exertion. None of this made sense to him. He was the black belt, the teacher, the expert, and yet nothing he threw came close to touching her. "Stand still and fight!" He barked, frustration breaking through the cracks in his composure. Danielle didn't flinch. She moved with the grace of someone who had mastered not just technique, but timing, rhythm, and restraint. Every dodge was precise, every angle intentional, and yet she still hadn't struck back. But now something changed. She began to move closer. With every missed punch, every overextended kick, she subtly closed the distance. An inch here, A sidestep there until Rick found himself cornered by exhaustion, his footwork sloppy and breaths ragged. "She's making him tired," a teen whispered from the sidelines. "She's toying with him," another murmured, eyes wide with awe. Rick, desperate to reclaim some ground, tried one last move from his wrestling days. Low takedown, hoping to use his weight to drive her to the mat. It was a solid technique against someone less skilled, but Danielle didn't resist. Instead, she stepped forward into it. It was as if time slowed. Her hands found the back of Rick's neck and shoulder, guiding his own momentum forward with a fluid grace that defied explanation. With one simple motion of force, no struggle, she pivoted, turned, and let gravity do the rest. Rick's body flew past her, helpless against the technique he couldn't even name. And then thud. His face hit the mat with a sound that echoed like thunder. Gasps broke through the silence. One parent covered their mouth. A child dropped their water bottle. Rick lay still for a moment, more stunned than hurt. The silence in the room was absolute. No one dared move. Danielle stood above him, calm, composed, not even breathing hard. He pushed himself up slowly, blinking in disbelief. How did you do that?" Danielle offered her hand. 13 years of practice before I ever stepped into this dojo." Rick ignored the hand and scrambled to his feet, flushed with humiliation. Around the room, students stared with wide eyes. The man they once saw as invincible had just been reduced to confusion and defeat. You're just a mom," he stammered. Danielle's voice was firm but kind. "No. I'm a mother who walked away from the fight to raise her daughter. That doesn't mean I forgot how to fight." And with that, the spell broke. Maya stepped forward, her eyes shining with emotion. "Mom was Danielle Knox," she announced. 3-time world champion. She retired when I was a baby. Phones came out. Fingers tapped rapidly. Seconds later, whispers swept across the room like wildfire. Articles, videos, highlight reels of a fighter who had once made entire arenas roar with excitement. Rick's face paled. The students turned toward Danielle, not with confusion now, but awe. She hadn't just survived the match, she had taught them all something profound. And Rick, he realized finally, that this hadn't been about bruising bodies. It was about humbling egos. For a moment, no one moved. Rick stood in the center of the mat, his chest still heaving, as whispers and gasps circled him like a storm. Students clutched their phones, eyes wide, as search results loaded and confirmed the truth. Danielle Carter wasn't just any mom. She had once been Danielle Knox, the Silent Storm, a legend in the world of mixed martial arts. Videos showed her dismantling champions twice her size. Articles praised her discipline, her speed, her uncanny ability to read opponents like open books. And now she had just done the same to their sensei in front of everyone. Rick's face flushed deeper, but this time not with pride. It was the shame of being exposed, not just for underestimating someone, but for humiliating them in the attempt. Danielle didn't gloat. She didn't say another word. She walked over to Maya, gently placed a hand on her shoulder, and whispered, "Let's go home." But before they could leave, Rick's voice broke the silence, not loud, not cocky, but quiet, humbled. "Wait." Danielle turned, meeting his eyes again. This time there was no arrogance in them, just the face of a man who had been forced to see himself clearly for the first time. "I owe you an apology," he said loud enough for the students to hear. "And I owe all of you one, too." He turned to the class, shoulders squared, voice firm but sincere. "What I did today wasn't martial arts. It was ego. I used this mat to entertain, not to teach. I made assumptions based on appearance, and I disrespected someone who's clearly given more to this sport than I ever have." The room was silent, but the energy had changed. It wasn't discomfort anymore, it was respect. Danielle nodded once. The strongest thing a fighter can do is admit when they were wrong. Rick stepped forward this time, extending his hand. She paused, then took it. "I let my belt make me blind," he admitted. "Thank you for reminding me what martial arts is really about." Some of the older students clapped. Then more followed. One by one, the gym erupted not in wild applause, but in something deeper. A collective moment of understanding. Humility. Growth. Danielle gave a faint smile and looked around the room. Real strength doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it just waits for the right moment. As she and Maya left the dojo, the door slowly closed behind them, but the impression she left remained like a tattoo on every heart in that room. For Rick Dalton, it was the day he stopped being a performer and began the long road to becoming a true teacher. For the students, it was a lesson they'd never forget. And for Maya, watching her mother walk away with quiet power, it was the moment she truly understood what legacy looked like. Outside the dojo, the sun had dipped low behind the treetops, casting golden light across the sidewalk. Danielle and Maya walked in silence for a moment, the air calm, almost sacred. Then Maya broke it softly. "You didn't have to do that, Mom," she whispered, eyes still filled with wonder. Danielle paused, then looked down at her daughter, her voice warm but resolute. "Yes, I did." She brushed a hand over Maya's shoulder. "Because one day someone will underestimate you. And when that day comes, I want you to know you don't have to shout. You don't have to prove anything. You just have to remember who you are and act with strength, not spite." Maya smiled, her tears finally falling, not from fear but pride. Back inside the gym, Rick stood with his students still processing the lesson that had unfolded before their eyes. A lesson no kata or belt test could ever teach. Danielle hadn't fought to win. She fought to remind them all what real power looks like. In life, the people who carry the most strength are often the quietest in the room. They don't need to announce themselves because their presence speaks volumes. Never judge someone by their appearance or their silence, because you may be standing next to a storm disguised as calm. Whether it's in a gym, a boardroom, or a grocery line, remember this: true strength is not about dominance. It's about discipline, dignity, and the wisdom to act only when it truly matters. What about you? Have you ever misjudged someone or been misjudged yourself? Would love to hear your story in the comments below. Your voice could inspire someone else to see differently. If this story moved, you don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more true life tales that prove quiet. Strength is the loudest force of all. See you in the next story.